This is the meeting of the Licensing, Health and Safety Enforcement Committee. I have an apology from Councillor Weston, who's going to be late. She's stuck at another meeting. Just for information, this meeting will be recorded and it will be available on the DBC website. I have the agenda approving the minutes of the last meeting of the full committee, which I wasn't there, but does anyone have any comments on the minutes of the last meeting? Yes, actually I was told, it slipped my mind, yes, Alex Binder, thank you. And I understand that Councillor Douris is standing in for Alex Binder. Thank you very much. So the minutes, I take it they are approved. Thank you. We've done apologies for absence. Any declarations of interest from the members? Anybody own a taxi firm or a cafe? No. Thank you, I'm grateful. Now we have some public participation. I believe Mr. Ahmed.
That's correct.
Is here. I circulated a question and answer to Mr. Ahmed, but if you would like to speak, then this is you're welcome to say what you want to say.
Okay. My name is Sajid Ahmed, proprietor of Choice Taxis, Universal Taxis. Been an operator in the town for 28 years. Basically, I'm here today to ask the councillors to look at the knowledge tests. They're basically arcade. We can't recruit drivers because it takes too long. And if you look outside in the town now, you've got Uber, Bolt, drivers working from outside the borough. And I believe it's a health and safety issue as well because there's no recourse on this. Myself, over the last 6 months, I've had to change the business model where I've had to purchase cars, invest in a workshop for health and safety again to make sure my cars are maintained. I've spent over in excess of £400,000 in the last 6 months. I feel over the last few years, the council have been sitting on their hands and that nothing's been done to accommodate the industry as such. And what people don't realise, it's a very part of the community, integral, especially during COVID times. We're almost the fourth emergency service. And I think we need to have reviews going forward that the recruitment, as long as their DBSs, their health and medicals are 100%, then I should be allowed to recruit drivers in the town, working for Hemel Hempstead and creating employment. And we can go over what's happened over the last 28 years, but it's going to be a waste of time. Kim Knight and Sally McDonald over the last 6 months have been very, very helpful in accommodating and listening to what I've said. And obviously it's come before the committee. And I would like you to think about this seriously now going forward, that in the region of probably 80 to 90 cars from PCO, London TfL are working in this town, and it's like the Wild West. I'd like to do something about this. I feel very passionate. 28 years service to Hemel Hempstead, taxpayer, paid in the UK, employing loads of people. And I think going forward, we need some kind of help from the council where we can recruit drivers at a faster pace, 6 months or a year, people lose interest going through the process. The process should be DBS, medical, and then the driver should be on a probation for a year or 2 years with our company. So basically, we're holding a license for the driver. If they decide they want to do a Hackney carriage test, that should be very stringent because they need to know where they're going. But modern technology enables drivers to find their way around, and plus the office that is working 24 hours a day, based in this country, again, employing local people to do local jobs.
Mr. Ahmed, thank you very much. I should have said there's a time limit a bit behind me.
No problems.
So it sounded as if you made some
I've covered a few points.
Very good points.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So effectively, it seems to me that we need some sort of certainty and not to put too many blocks in the way of recruiting drivers to encourage the industry. Did anybody want to reply to Mr. Ahmed? Yes, Councillor Deacon.
Yeah, you mentioned, am I allowed to ask a question, Chair?
Yeah. Yes.
No.
I don't want to take too long, but I think it is worth, as Mr. Ahmed is here, to explore the issues. Yeah.
You mentioned towards the end, he said about the Wild West, and there was something I just didn't understand or capture. Could I just expand on that a little bit, please?
You may. Basically, the licensing team is very thin. You have cars from outside town working here. Obviously, there's no enforcement going on because there's only 1 or 2 licence officers. You can't expect them to work 24 hours a day. And pretty much cars from whether they're working from Luton under PCO or London TfL, they're doing pretty much what they want to do, whether they're parking on taxi ranks or taking jobs on board. And we have them very customers ringing up, think a local company's picked on whether they've lost an umbrella or they've had a problem with the driver. So basically, if we can drive the recruitment, we're going to eradicate some of these problems because you'll have local people working in the local area who have far more superior knowledge and they're answerable to the Decorum Borough Council licensing.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Ahmed. As you know, we're here to consider the draft policy, which is going to go out for consultation, at which you and others will have the opportunity to comment on it. I just thought I'd invite you now, if you want very briefly to, if you have any comments on the document itself, that very briefly, just some sort of areas to give us some guidance on where we might, in your view, we might consider making changes.
Thank you, Chairman Gale. I sent some comments over to Sally McDonald yesterday, and she's given me a brief description. But I think the most important issue here is, and I think yourselves, this taxi committee and all the way, if people have wanted to make any comments, they should have been here. And this is what's been going on for years and years. I don't know what it is. I've got the passion. I've got to say what I've got to say, and I believe in Hemel Hempstead. And
yes, Mr. Ahmed,
so basically my comments are...
May interrupt, sorry, Mr. Ahmed. If you've got any specific areas in the document itself,
yes.
We're very grateful for your comments, but if you've got anything specific, just give me the opportunity.
The specific is relapse of licences. I think they should be extended, not... there should be a bit more grace period. I personally think all cars these days should have credit card machines in them. They should be compulsory. And the emissions test, we need a clarification going forward whether the vehicles that we purchase today that are Euro 6 are going to be valid until 2035. I've had to put a brake on 4 vehicles I was going to order from Cab Direct, brand new, and I'll put that order on hold until I get a clarification from the council. So the emissions is very important that they were going to carry on.
I'm very grateful for that, Mr. Ahmed. Thank you very much. Now, you're welcome to stay and listen to the
if you don't mind,
deliberations.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. So we're now on to item 5 on the agenda, which is the draft revisions to the taxi and private hire licensing policy. This is a request to consult upon changes. So just to be clear, this is a draft document, and the proposal is to send this document out for consultation, and we're asked to decide whether to send it for consultation or whether to make any changes to it, or whether perhaps not, possibly not to send it, but actually to consider some more detailed changes to it. So that's what we're here to decide. So, but first I'd like to ask Sally McDonald, who's going to present the paper and just explain a few things about it. Thank you very much.
Taxi licensing policy has now been in place for 3 years. During that time, it has become apparent that some of the content needs looking
Sorry, forgive me. Can everybody hear? Because I think the microphone might not be near enough.
Because yours is on, I'm getting feedback. So that's better. Do you want me to start again?
Yes, if you could, please.
Okay. The taxi licensing policy has now been in place for 3 years. During that time, it has become apparent that some of the content needs looking at and refreshing. Most of the content is established and not up for consultation, but the areas for revision are as follows. First one is clarifying that once the licence expires, it ceases to exist, and therefore there cannot be a grace period to allow for renewal if the paperwork is not submitted in time. Now, I've clarified with Mr. Ahmed about this. If an application comes in, a full application comes in with a payment, we will hold that licence open. But if it doesn't, the licence will expire, and we can't grant a grace period on something that doesn't exist. So it's really important to clarify that if the application comes in time with the payment, we can hold it. Okay, so that's the first one. The second one is changes to the written part of the knowledge test and to confirm the requirement to complete training on driver safety, safeguarding and communication skills. Changes to the emissions section of the policy to remove the existing 2027 deadline for hybrid electric vehicles, but reaffirm the aim to encourage take-up of hybrid electric vehicles before the 2035 deadline set by the government. And making it a mandatory requirement for all drivers to supply email addresses, which will ensure we can properly advise and consult on any changes or information the drivers need quickly and efficiently. And the other changes are minor changes to job titles, correction of some errors that were in the policy, and rechecks of the hyperlinks throughout the policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful. And thank you for all your work on the revisions to the document. Now, if I can open it up to any questions from members. Yes, Councillor Deacon.
Oh, yes, sorry about that. Just a point of clarity, really. Was it you tried to amend the policy 3 years ago, or was I wrong in reading that?
The policy was a new policy 3 years ago.
Fine.
So, okay.
No, that's fine. And just to follow up, if you don't mind, Chair. This is like a scrutiny committee, isn't it? It's normally like a scrutiny committee. Was there any reason that it didn't go to Cabinet first, like normal scrutiny committees do?
Licensing committee have full delegated powers under the council's constitution to take licensing policies forward and agree them.
Okay.
So that's why it's come here.
No, okay, because I just think on reflection, it was quite a lot, not only a lot to read within a week, but also a lot to digest and to reflect on some important policy changes. And it's a little bit abnormal to what I'm used to in my short experience. Thank you.
Yes, I should say any questions or observations for this. I mean, we're here to discuss. It's not a council meeting where we just ask questions. But Councillor Santa Maria.
Thank you. I do think that it's right for us to move the deadline for emissions back to encourage to allow business owners to update, but in a time that's manageable. But I just wondered if any other dates had been considered, such as 2030, when we're aiming to be carbon neutral as a council.
We haven't put a deadline on it, basically, because we don't know how it's going to pan out. I understand that the taxi bit isn't in scope with the climate emergency panel here. So at the moment, we don't have that. But obviously, if things change, if national government make different decisions, it'll come straight back here for review. But we're not mind readers at the moment, and we don't know. So,
Sure, thank you.
And Councillor Bristow.
Yeah, really just a point of clarification on point 2.1.1 regarding the so-called grace period. You've stated that as the licenses could cease to exist, the grace period is kind of impossible, hence it's being removed. I'm just sort of wondering why or how it exists in the first place in that case.
yeah, license is granted to a driver for a certain period of time. Once that deadline is up, once the license gets to that date, it ceases to be. If it's not renewed, then it will cease. and the driver would have to apply for a brand new licence. So ultimately, to keep that going, to keep a licence that they already have, then we urge them to actually apply beforehand. They get renewals 2 months before, so they get plenty of notice to be able to do that.
So wherein then lay the grace period?
Sorry, can you just repeat that?
Well, where was the grace period then? Was it the period after the expiration of the licence in which they could renew without having to apply again from the top?
Yeah, our old team leader actually used this during COVID because of the unusual situation we were in, but it's not a workable solution and we need to have some clarity going forward. So given the fact that everyone is 100%, 99% of people are on email now, they can actually email their applications back in. We send it all out by email. There's a payment link on the website to be able to make that payment. So wherever they are, they can actually access that and put those forms in and pay.
Well, okay, in that case, yeah, 2 months renewal seems eminently reasonable, and it just reinforces the idea that we should have every licensed taxi driver's email address in that case, especially if it's all digitized. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Yes, I've got Councillor Deacon.
Okay, just to follow up on that point, how long are taxi drivers' licenses? Is it a year? Is it several years?
They're 3 years.
3 years. Okay, thank you.
And I've got Councillor Johnson.
Yes, obviously in your report and as referred to, there's an issue here in Decorum with recruitment. And the report suggests that the changes being made will improve hopefully improve the recruitment situation, the numbers of taxi drivers we have in the borough. Are you confident, very confident, how successful these changes will be in achieving that?
It's hard to say from this point. We do know that the numbers are declining and we do want to see the trade grow. So if we can actually take away some of the hoops that they have to jump through, i.e. making the knowledge test a much more easy to work with test, if you like. We want to abolish the private hire test completely, the written test, because they do have access to sat-nav. They use that every time, and because they're pre-booked journeys, they can just set the sat-nav up and away you go. Not so easy for Hackney, because obviously they're on a meter. So that's why we've kept a test for a written test for the Hackney. But the other training, safeguarding, driver, advanced driver training and communication skills will remain. So there'll still be those parts of it, but the written tests are easier, hopefully more accessible for drivers, and will encourage more take-up.
Councillor Reynolds.
Yeah, just again, probably just a point of clarification on the emissions piece. So the current deadline was 2027. Is that in anticipation of being with the electric vehicles by 2030? So it gave sort of 3-year leeway with the license.
Yes.
And with the new 2035, are you anticipating that there's almost a deadline at 2032, or is this going to be 2035 and then on to 3 years past that?
At this point, we're just removing that deadline. I think we need to see where this government goes. Obviously, at this point, we don't know. We don't know what this new government is going to propose. It's a case of, at the moment, try and make this workable for the drivers, try and give them some certainty going forward. As Mr. Armour just pointed out, there is a great deal of uncertainty about whether to buy vehicles, what to buy, will they be able to licence them, and the affordability factor as well. We've had a lot of drivers expressing concerns about the affordability.
I would sort of have the observation that this is, of course, a consultation paper, and on the basis that if you don't ask, you don't get. And I understand there might be one might take the view there might be some resistance to a deadline of 2027 or something from the industry to fully electrify. But we have the climate emergency to consider, and if one puts out a consultation paper, at least we will get an answer. We might get a fully reasoned answer as to why, say, 2030 is impractical and can't work and is impossible, in which case we can take it into account. But if we don't ask, we just don't get. And if we just put it back to 2035, we're not sort of asking anything, really. It's just an observation. But Councillor Douras.
Thank you. It's been a long time since I've been on the licensing committee, so it's quite interesting, and I took the opportunity to read the documents. Unfortunately, as I've read them, I've tended to proofread them as well, so I'm going to be asking quite a number of questions, I'm afraid, Chairman, just for clarification in terms of some of the words that are in or are not in. But before I get to that, just picking up the mention of sat-nav and the knowledge, how does that work necessarily? Because I'm aware that you can put in a start and finish journey into two different sat-navs and you will get two different distances and two different journeys. And if you're talking about Hackney carriage, where it's being measured on X number of meters per cost, how do they work out? And should we actually not necessarily rely upon sat-navs, although they are convenient, we know that, but should we actually rely upon the knowledge of the Hackney carriage driver?
I think for Hackneys, we are still keeping a written test for Hackneys, basically because they probably wouldn't have the opportunity if they picked up, on the rank to actually put something in a sat-nav. With private hire, it's a pre-booked journey. So they would have the opportunity to then work that journey out, and it's a fee that's agreed. So it's a slightly different thing. We've kept in the written test for Hackneys.
And Councillor Williams.
Yeah, I'm just going back to the time period for different types of vehicles. Are we not mixing up two? I mean, we seem to be going back to what the government might do about 2030 or 2035, but the government policy is on the sale of new vehicles. It's not on the use of vehicles. And they're not saying in 2030 or 2035 you can't drive a petrol car. If you buy it in 2034, you can drive it for 30 years. So I don't see the relevance of the government policy in terms of us setting a policy. We can set a time frame for people to have more efficient vehicles, and we can set a time frame for how long they can use them. But I would have, if someone buys a vehicle now, you could expect it to have 10 years life. We can't say to them in 2029, we're not going to license a vehicle you bought in 2025. That wouldn't seem to me to be realistic, because they've expended quite a lot of money on purchasing that vehicle. If we're going to go for the sort of, the 8-seater transit, probably £50,000 or more. So I think if we should be giving an assumption that if you purchase a vehicle that's compliant when you purchase it, it can remain in service until you, for a significant period of time. A minimum, I would suggest, of 10 years from its date of purchase.
Oh, I've got Councillor Deacon.
Just in regards to cars, I read somewhere, I don't know whether it was a question or some additional reading, how there were worries that how expensive it was to fit in disabled wheelchair access into taxis. So irrespective of what we agree in regards to more efficient cars, could we have additional concessions for those taxis that have invested quite heavily in that equipment if it was deemed to be obsolete when the time comes?
That's something that obviously we'd have to give some thought for. I know some councils have reduced fees for electric vehicles, but we have to look at our budget every year, and the process is exactly the same for processing those type of vehicles as against petrol vehicles. So that's a real no-no. At the moment, we can't consider that.
Yeah, I might not have explained myself, but maybe of a deadline. So if in whenever the year is going to be, whether it's 2035, could we, and we did agree that, could we allow older vehicles that had invested heavily in wheelchair access to continue a bit longer, the vehicle itself?
Again, that's something I think we need some consideration on. It's something that could come back for a future policy revision. I can't give you an answer right now because we haven't done the research and looked at the implications of that.
No, I appreciate that, and because that's sort of, we've been reading all this has been new to us for 1 week. So, we're trying to deal with it in our way as well. No, thank you.
Well, Councillor Douris, I should say that from your indication earlier, if it's a question of sort of typing errors and ambiguities and things like that, it might be worth sending an email online to have those corrected. If those are the if it's proofreading type comments, but if it's something substantive, then we'd be very happy to hear it.
It depends how substantive it might be, because you're dealing with a policy which might be governed by legal requirements, and as you'll probably be aware, a missing word here and there in terms of law can be vital and important.
Well, why don't we try it and see?
Well, exactly, that's what I was going to do, actually. If I can take you to page 30, paragraph 11.2, I think you'll find in line 2 there is a missing bean. That's the first one. You don't necessarily need to look it up, but if you make a note of it, and if you've got any queries, you can come back to me. In page 31, paragraph 11.11, I wonder if there should be some reference to penalty points for drivers. In page 32, paragraph 12.6, I would say it makes reference to the fact that it says show. I think it's relating to DBS checks. I would suggest that actually should say prove, because to some extent anybody can show something that may allude to a DBS check, but it needs to be proof.
Councillor Douris, I can see that this may well take up quite a lot of time in this meeting, and if you've got a list of these, we'd be very grateful for you to. You could submit those, and by circulating in writing. I don't think we've got time to go through any typos in this. These were just these are amendments to an existing policy, and they're in red. The amendments are in red. The existing policy has been out since 2021. It was in fact approved under the old administration. And so the alterations are in red, and that's what we're really discussing today. So we're not going to go through this whole document looking for typos and grammatical errors. So if you have anything to do with the red passages that you don't understand, that's not clear, then we'd welcome the comment. But other than that, please, if you could put your submissions in writing.
I will catch up with the officer separately, but I find it's unfortunate that a member is being restricted to presenting some points which may or may not be relevant. However, I will defer to you as chairman.
As we say, this is a document which is going out for public consultation, which anybody will be welcome to make comments on in writing.
Merely wish to be helpful to the officers.
And we're very grateful to you, Councillor Douris. It seems that we have some discrete issues to make a decision on that were raised in this meeting. One is to do with the grace period, which was raised by Mr. Ahmed. The other is to do with the knowledge, the sat-nav versus the knowledge. And then the question of the emissions date, the date on page 42, paragraph 19.4. So I can see that I've got Councillor Deacon and Councillor Williams who want to speak, but after that I propose that we have a vote on those issues to see whether they want to change, whether we want to change them and put them out for consultation in a modified format or as is, or not to put them out for consultation, but actually could have further consideration before we do that. So those are the choices. But I've got Councillor Deacon to speak.
Yeah, that remind me, just 2 points, Chair. The first is about training. Am I right thinking we are going to try and go more online training? And if we were, how do we know, how secure is it that the real the real taxi driver is answering that test online and not someone else.
So the online training, a lot of it, sorry, is online already. So for example, safeguarding, disability awareness training can be completed online. We have a list of approved providers that are on our website. So there's 2 or 3 that you can choose from. To be honest, in terms of is it the driver answering the question, we have to believe that they are a fit and proper person who wouldn't cheat or get a friend to help or Google it or anything else like that. I believe that the providers themselves have some sort of way of, doing checks beforehand to establish who it is that's taken the test. Obviously, as they're outside providers, we don't have all of the ins and outs, but they will have, a way of sort of identifying who that person is before they take the test.
Okay, no, thank you. And I just
sorry, can I just come in as well, a bit more information?
Sorry.
On the communication skills test, we actually established that the applicant is the correct applicant before they use the phone to take the test. So that's another safeguard there. Yeah, and it's in person.
It's very good to hear. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. And it's just maybe just an observation, if I can say, Chair. I'm fairly comfortable with everything apart from the electric vehicle. And it's just, I personally feel I just need a little bit more time to make a decision. That's my view, but I just wanted to share that.
I'm grateful. Councillor Williams.
Thank you. I'm quite happy for us to send this whole thing out for consultation because we're actually making a decision on what the timescale for a vehicle should be this evening. We're deciding whether to send it out to consultation. I think sending it out to consultation with the trade may give us some more information about how they view the timescales and what it might mean. I just wanted to touch on the grace period because as far as I'm concerned, I'm very clear in my mind there shouldn't be a grace period. If your licence expires on the 31st of March and you haven't renewed it, then on the 1st of April you shouldn't be driving. I don't know how it works for their insurance if they're not licensed. If there's a long grace period, it would appear to me that someone could avoid reapplying for their license if they know, for example, that there's going to be something they've done in their 3 years they've not declared that will come up. It would mean it wouldn't be renewed. I mean, you can't go through an airport with a passport that expired a month ago and just say, well, I've got 3 months grace on my passport. You get a new passport. I think it's only reasonable that a license that has to be renewed once every 3 years, that you make sure if that's your living that you apply for that license. So to me, there shouldn't be any grace period. If you say if it expires on the 31st of March, on the 1st of April, you've got a new license or you stop driving. But beyond that, I'm happy to send this out to consultation because I think it will give us a bit more information on what the trade think about the measures proposed, and we can make a decision based on that, our thoughts and that information when it comes back.
I would observe it as well that my practicing certificate expires on the same date every year, and I just know that I have to apply on that date. There's no mystery when that date's going to be. It's my responsibility to apply to a new one. I don't get a grace period if I forget or if I just don't manage to do it in time. So I would tend to agree with Councillor Williams on that point. And there are reminders, as Sally McDonald's pointed out, for the drivers to renew their licenses, so they ought to just get the paperwork in on time. So, I suppose, are we agreed on that amendment, which seems to be a clarification of the position? In fact, it simply confirms that there's no grace period. It looked as if in fact there wasn't, but it was sort of informally applied. But I think we may not need a vote on it if we've got unanimity on that amendment being agreed. Yeah, thank you. So the other one is the amendment about relaxing, if you like, the requirements for what's referred to as the knowledge in the light of, I mean, it seems that the report sets out, seems to suggest that decorum's quite strict on that, stricter than other boroughs, and we've got to bear in mind, according to the report, if you like, competition with other areas, and we don't want cab drivers discouraged from applying in this borough and going to boroughs where it's easier. We have sat-navs, and it seems that things have changed. So are we content to agree that amendment? Thanks. And the other thing is the date for the emissions. Now, we did have a date of 27th. That was approved. That was part of the policy before. Scrapping it and going all the way to 2035 seems to be a bit of a climb down, and it sort of simply takes the issue off the table for the public consultation. One might take the view that this is simply a consultation document, and we might get some very cogent reasoning from anybody who's got who's got an interest or expertise on these matters, and will tell us very clearly why, say, 2030 is not a practical date to switch to electric. In which case we can modify what we want, or at the same time we might get very good input from feedback from the consultation, which will persuade us otherwise. But if we don't put one out, if we don't put anything out, then we simply miss the opportunity. And as a council which has declared a climate emergency and formally said 2027 is the date, it seems to be sending all the wrong, might seem to be sending all the wrong signals. So I'm wondering whether we want to think again about that particular amendment. So I'm inviting anybody to think again about that. Do we want to push back to 2035 or perhaps suggest another date?
I would suggest that the original target from central government 2030 would make the most sense. I, just from personal experience being in the motor trade, do not believe that 2027 is a practical date to switch over to pure BEV taxi car services. The infrastructure, the upfront cost, they're prohibitive at this point, and it would run the risk of making our licensed taxis uncompetitive with the firms that run off apps and contracted employees. I would suggest 2030 a much more practical date.
I've got Councillor Santa Maria.
My understanding is we're not actually setting a date, we're just leaving it because we don't know what's going to happen yet. So it's not that we're saying 2035, it's that we're saying we don't know at the moment. Is that correct, Sally?
So yeah, as a response to that, I would say, as I put in my report, I think that everyone, like the normal people, everyone else has got this deadline of 2035. Now the drivers have to buy their own vehicles. They have to fund their own vehicles just like we do. They don't get incentives from the council to do that. They don't get council vehicles. So therefore, I'm concerned that putting a restriction on them when the rest of the public doesn't have that restriction is quite unreasonable. That's obviously my view.
I've got Councillor Douris again, please.
I wonder whether you might be able to insert after the number 2035 the words "or an alternative date by exception," which would actually give, if you like, the thrust to 2035, but at the same time give an element of ability to amend that, because I do take note of Mr. Ahmed's point that we don't want to enforce a date on the licensed trade which they are not going to be able to keep to realistically, and therefore we will lose the licensed trade within the borough. And that might be a form of words that would get round it.
That sort of almost pushes it the other way, to have, if I understand your point right, Councillor Douris, that in fact, no vehicles will be licensed after 2035 if they're petrol, diesel, subject to exceptions. So in fact, there will be some vehicles licensed after 2035. That's almost the other way from what Councillor Bristow was suggesting, which is that actually we bring the deadline back to 2030, sort of nearly in line with what it was. I would observe that 2035 is a date that was picked by the sort of previous government, and we don't know what the new government is going to do about it. It seems that if this is, of course, not enforcing anything at the moment, this is simply putting out to consultation. Um, so I've got Councillor Deacon.
This might be a daft question, but how long do taxis last for? How many years?
In fact, Mr. Ahmed might help.
10 years, okay.
I mean, it seems to me that a lot of the thrust of what Mr. Ahmed was saying earlier was certainty. We need the business, and people need certainty. We do have a sort of council policy of going carbon neutral by 2030. That's our date, irrespective of any sort of external government date. We've got 2030 and we've got 2050. So it seems that might be a date to aim for, but if there might be some exceptions to 2030, it's a possibility.
Yeah, because it's just following up, Chair. I'm just trying to get in my head, what's the worst thing can happen? Us say 2035 and then governments, but it's 2030. How would I feel as a taxi driver? Or it going the opposite way? We saying 2030, so they get cleaner energy, cleaner cars earlier, but then it gets back to 2035. I'm trying to think, if I was a taxi driver, what scenario would be worse? I'm also a little bit confused about what's actually going in the consultation. Is there going to be anything in the consultation that the public can read that's going to have the date of 2035 or not? I'm a bit confused, sorry. If that's what
what we're being asked to decide is this document here going out for consultation, which at paragraph 19.4 on page 42.
Right. Thank you. I'll have another reread. Thank you.
It's got a set paragraph 19 has got emissions, and what it doesn't say is what's being removed, because in the previous document that 2035 was 2027. Have you got page 42?
Section what, 19?
19. It's the section in red, 19.3. And it's 19, in fact, 19.4 is the, and that replaces the current policy as it is, as I understand it, says no new vehicles will be licensed after 2027 if they are petrol diesel. So this is in fact a very kind of significant change in the way it is. I mean, one of the options might be, as we've only had the document a week, is to take a bit longer to think about it. But then, of course, we get a bit more uncertainty for a bit longer. One of the things that we could do is actually put, because it's as Councillor Bristow suggested, it's only a consultation document. If we put 2030, we might get hundreds of voices saying, no, it's not possible for these reasons. And then it comes back to us, and we will take all those reasons on board. If we put 2035, it's a sort of arbitrary date plucked from the last government. It may have no relevance. 2030, it actually sends a signal, and it puts out a message, which we might get back saying, rubbish, but at least we'll have asked the question. If you don't ask the question, you don't get the answer.
Okay, yeah, understood. But if we didn't do that, and if it went out with 2035, then went to consultation, we can't really change it to 2030 afterwards, could we? Because it's after the consultation.
If there were any changes, obviously in government legislation or any other changes were made, it would come back before this committee for review again. The policy would come back.
But is that only based on the main government legislation, not anything that locally we want to do as a council?
What we've done is look at the concerns that the drivers have with this and the demise of the trade ultimately.
Right.
So it's important to grow the taxi trade rather than to let it struggle. And I think that's the view we took.
Yeah, no, if you don't mind saying, Sally, you're making some really, really good points. And I think there's so many permutations that I need to understand fully and reflect on to make the right decision. And I don't think tonight, for me personally, I've got all those answers and reflections to do that. Maybe in a month's time after consideration, maybe, but I'm struggling with all the permutations in my mind at the moment.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Williams.
sorry, I'm going back to my previous point. I don't understand why there is any connection between our licensing policy and the government's decision on when to phase out the sale of petrol or diesel cars. There seems no logical reason to link those two to me. What we're saying, and potentially saying in this policy, is that at some point in the future, to be decided, we are going to set a date when we won't license vehicles that are driven by petrol or diesel engines. The government is saying at 2035, they'll stop selling. Not that they will no longer license them, you can't use them for the next 50 years after that if you keep it going. We're saying that there'll be a date in which you can't use them, which is a completely different policy to what the government's policy is on the sale of new vehicles. So I don't see any reason why we're linking these two. They're two arbitrary dates for completely different policies that we somehow seem to be linking together. And unless the government steps it up and says, from 2035, we're saying to all councils, you can't allow a vehicle to be, or 2030, whatever it might be, you can't allow a petrol vehicle to be used for taxis or private hire in your borough, which they're not saying. This seems to be a decision which is entirely within our hands. So, and I don't understand why we're struggling to make a decision or on sending this out to consultation. I think 2027 is too soon because electric vehicles are still expensive. We talk about how long a vehicle will last, but the vast majority, I suspect, of vehicles which are licensed in this borough are bought second-hand. They're not, the majority of them are probably not bought new. They could be 4 or 5 years old before they even come into use as a taxi. So I think we need to be realistic about the affordability of electric vehicles, what the value of the trade is in this town. We're not in London. 2027 is too soon. So go out to consultation and see if there is a feeling in the trade about what is a realistic timetable to introduce it. Whereas we're not making a decision this evening, we're just asking to go out there and consult with those who've got an interest in it. And it might not just be the trade, it might be environmental groups and others who've got a view on when that policy should be implemented. They can all have a say in it.
Councillor Williams makes a good point that we're not tied to government deadline for when cars can be sold. They're not the same policy. They're not entirely unconnected because we are asked to pick a date, a potential date by which we don't license non-electric vehicles anymore. And the question is, what should that date be? Should it be 2035 because that's the date that the government picked for a different policy, or should it be 2030 for a suggestion because that's our date, because that's a Decorah Borough Council date for when we are trying to go carbon neutral? And as Councillor Williams said, it's out for consultation. We in this room don't have the full panoply of expertise on this matter, with great respect to Mr. Ahmed, who is a very important voice, but nonetheless only one voice of the many voices who we're going to hear. And if we ask the question, 2030, we might get many, many voices explaining why it's not possible. So I think Mr. Ahmed wants to say something. Yes.
The councillor has made very valid points. It's for the sale of the vehicles 2035. Me, as a proprietor, I would like to purchase vehicles knowing that I can use them within the council policy until 2035. So for the sale of the vehicle and the use of the vehicle are two different subjects. I would like you to prove to me, say, yes, we'll license new vehicles till 2035 unless the government say otherwise.
So it's one of the possibilities is, given the life of a taxi of about 10 years, is perhaps the date should be set at 10 years after the introduction of the policy. Might be a way to deal with that, to get certainty, so that they've got a 10-year lead-in time. Might be a way of dealing with that.
That seems to me a very sensible compromise. That yeah, we give surety to the industry.
So, Councillor Deacon.
My last question, I promise. Just so I understand how this policy works. As a committee member, if in the future I wanted to change an item on this policy, could I request it or not? There is a reason for me asking.
You can write into to the team and actually make the request, and then we can do some research.
But it works in a different, because it's not what I'm used to. It's not the the cabinet power that come up with those decisions and influence. It's just someone asking and hoping that they'll be heard. So meaning what we agree here, if we make an agreement, is incredibly important. Because it's less likely it's going to be, we can influence any change after it's been agreed, is my question, really.
My understanding is that it comes back to us after the consultation. So we put this out, we get comments on it, we get consultation from the industry and from consumer groups, and I'm hoping from disability groups as well, and all interested parties, and then we can deliberate on it. And at that point, we would have to make the decision more strongly. That's my understanding.
Yeah, you have the power to make the decision once the responses come back. We will present the responses to you as a committee, and then from there you make the decision on where you want to go with it.
Can I ask how well publicised the consultation will be? Are we targeting particular groups or because of course we've got very strong representations from the industry, but we also have to take care of the other interested consumer customers, vulnerable people who rely on taxis and don't drive, all kind of environmental groups as well. So what are we going to do to make sure that they have their voices?
Yeah, we do a full consultation. It goes on the public website, obviously. Last time when this consultation went round, it was actually put into Quorum Digest, so it went to every household in the borough, so they could actually read that. We do obviously specifically target the stakeholders, which is the drivers. They will get individual consultation. The portfolio holder will get it, the leader of the council will get it, the climate emergency group will get it, and any other environmental groups that are available to us will take the lead off, obviously, the climate emergency team and from the pollution environmental health officer for that information.
So, I mean, would anybody suggest that we actually don't, on this point, that we don't make a decision today, but actually have it for further deliberation? It seems to me that what we need is consultation. What we need is evidence and information from other groups. But I'm hesitant to leave it as it is with just a date of 2035, in that it seems so far off that's not going to be really commented on. If we suggest a date, then we'll get some robust responses to it. We could suggest a date of 10 years from the date the policy is implemented for certainty. But is anybody not happy to vote on this today? Councillor Douris.
With respect, I think we do need to make a decision in terms of the agenda today and the recommendation, because the recommendation is to go to consultation, and we will see what the consultation brings back. It's at that point that we will make the decision in the light of the consultation responses, either to go with A, B, C, or nothing. But I fear that if you don't make the decision to go to consultation today, you will actually find yourselves, or we will find ourselves, delaying this particular item, and it will go into the next cycle and it will be delayed further.
Does anybody disagree that we should decide on this today? It seems that there's very cogent reasons why we should decide today. It's not to say we're not allowed to, but
just to enable me to make a decision. If we did defer for a month, I mean, is the licensing sort of window that full of decisions that are upcoming? Because it doesn't seem that we meet even monthly. So is that a little bit of a red herring?
We have recess coming up now until September. The next meeting is September. If it goes in September, then the consultation probably won't come back till November or December. So we're looking at another potentially a 6-month delay.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Yep.
Sorry, I've got another question.
Councillor Williams.
Sorry. when it goes out to consultation, just I think it's a question for Sally or Kim. When it goes out, does it go with any sort of covering note that says, the council is considering these changes to the policy, or does
Yes, it goes on the Let's Talk Decorum site on the website. There's a full explanation of why it's going and a summary of the changes. And that will also be included in any emails that go directly to the stakeholders.
So could I suggest then, if it moves this forward, because I'm very keen we go to consultation. In doing so, our covering says something, and the wording can be sorted that the council is consulting. Its current policy is that all vehicles licensed after 2027 should be electric or hybrid. We are seeking your views on whether this is a realistic aspiration or whether a more suitable date should be considered, and people can comment on that.
Sorry, Councillor Williams, can you just clarify that? 2027, he said all vehicles licensed after 2027.
That's what we're currently saying in our policy, isn't it?
Currently saying
yes.
That,
yeah. So we could say. So I'm saying that we go to consultation, saying the council's current policy is that all vehicles licensed from 2027 should be electric, and we're seeking views on whether this is and you can sort the wording out with the chairman. We're seeking views on whether this is a realistic timescale for the trade to meet, or should another date be considered, and wording to that effect. So we get a view on whether 2027 is something that the trade thinks is suitable, or whether another period should be considered. And then sorts of comments that Mr. Ahmed's made about, well, if I buy a vehicle now and it costs me a lot of money, I'm very reluctant to do so because I might not be able to use it after 2027, and we can consider those comments when we come to revise the policy when we've done the consultation. Does that help?
Yeah, just to answer that, on the summary page, it will actually say it's being changed, the changes are from to. So it's like this was this, now it's going to be this. So it will summarise what they are. So it will say that it was 2027, but it's looking to change to this. So, and then it invites you to make the comments.
Sorry, Chair. As long as it's clear in the consultation that we're seeking views on that possible change, that should help elicit some comments.
So I mean, the suggestion could be that seems like a good suggestion, that it's clear that it was 2027, and then if we suggest our date of 2030, because 2035 is not, it's not really our date, but suggesting the change from 2027 to 2030, we might get comments which say, well, this is impractical, this can't possibly work, in which case they could be taken on board, and make it clear that this is just the proposal, or the alternative. I mean, I can see the arguments that if one's already bought a taxi and then suddenly a policy is thrust upon them where they can't use that vehicle, not knowing what the policy was, it might be a bit harsh. So I would suggest 10 years from the date that the policy comes into force might be reasonable. Does anybody have a...
May I ask a question? So if I was to buy a vehicle tomorrow, these vehicles I'm buying are brand new, 2 diesel vehicles, if there was to be licensed in the next 2 months, would that license be valid for the next 10 years? Is that a yes or a no? Or are you going to say after 2027, you can't use that vehicle?
I think it was clarity on what we were talking about.
On the current, according to the current proposed changes, the implications are that it's paragraph 19.4, page 42. No new vehicles will be licensed after whatever date. So no new vehicles will be licensed after that if they are petrol diesel. It's a little ambiguous, isn't it? Because does that mean no newly bought vehicles? What does new mean?
By new, we mean any vehicles like being licensed for the first time, rather than, brand new.
So effectively, no new license will be granted for vehicles after such a date, if they're, yeah. So the answer would then be no. If they're licensed now, then a renewal of a license you could renew their license.
As it currently stands, with the current rules, if Mr. Ahmed did go and buy his new diesel vehicles tomorrow, be okay for now. But come 2027, whenever his renewal date is, we would not renew it. That's the current rules. What we're looking to do is to remove that 2027 date to whenever. So if Mr. Ahmed goes and buys his new vehicles, he'll have much longer to use them.
He'll get the lifespan out of the vehicle.
Yeah. So he'll have longer to use it. So he can renew every year up until 20, whatever date is agreed.
Is that clear, Mr. Ahmed?
I just want to get this crystal clear because it's £100,000 worth of 2 vehicles, brand new vehicles. So if I was to buy these vehicles tomorrow, license them with you, under the current rules, they would not be licensed in 2028. Is that correct?
Correct.
When will we have a firm decision, because obviously I don't want to buy these vehicles for £100,000, that these vehicles will be allowed to use with the government policy to 2035, as the councillor eloquently put it, that the sale of vehicles is totally different to use of vehicles. Is that a council policy or do you run with central government?
We have gone with the 2035 date because that is the cut off for the public to actually stop buying new vehicles. So we've gone with that date, really in tandem with a lot of other local authorities around this area, to give our drivers obviously an equal chance and not have that restriction. If they've got a restriction and the other councils haven't, they can just easily go to another council, and that's not what we want. We want to try and grow the trade.
But what's being proposed now is it's a different thing. So if we brought that date from 2035 to 2030, you could buy those vehicles, you could license them now, and they would still be valid for license renewals after whatever date that we put. So as long as they were first licensed,
No.
it says no new vehicles will be licensed after 2035. That's what new means. It means new licenses. It means, that's what, it says no new vehicles will be licensed after 2035. And I asked if that meant brand new vehicles, and you said it means vehicles which have not new applications for license. So provided the vehicle was already licensed before the new now, then no new licenses, you could still renew the license. That's my understanding of what this says in the light of what you said.
We're just looking at this wording.
Councillor Deacon.
How frequently are vehicles licensed? Is it
every year?
Thank you.
It looks like this policy would apply to renewals, to new licenses rather than renewals.
I think personally, I think the most acceptable solution would be any vehicles licensed before 2027 should have the 10-year grace period of being re-licensed all the time for that 10-year period. Because I don't believe there's the infrastructure out there for electric cars. People can't even afford the cars that we're actually using currently. And what's happened now is most drivers have decided to hire cars of companies like we're providing cars now for drivers because they cannot replace equipment due to COVID.
It seems to me there's certain ambiguity in paragraph 19.4 of this policy. It may well be we do need to just have a rethink of how it's worded so that we're very clear actually about what we intend to achieve.
Sorry,
and that's clear.
Sorry, Chairman, can we have a short adjournment while we look at the wording of this rather than bringing it back in 6 weeks' time or whatever? So can we have a look now with myself and Kim and then present an amendment? It won't take us long to do it.
How long? Because there is another item on the agenda.
5 minutes.
So
we know what we want. We've just got to get the wording down. That's all.
Yeah. Okay. We can. you need to focus on the other item as well, I take it. So we wouldn't be able to deal with the other item while you're doing that.
Well, obviously we've got to focus on that, so I can't ask questions on this unless Kim wants to have a look at this while I take questions. Are you happy to do that?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, you want to take it outside?
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
So should we, Kim is going to look at this and we'll park the issue and move on to the next item of the agenda whilst that comes back, because that was the last aspect of that item that we're going to discuss. So we'll come back and see if Kim can redo the wording to see if it's something that we might be able to consider today. So we'll move on briefly to we'll move on now to the other item on the agenda, which is the pavement licensing. So I think Sally McDonald's is going to present that.
Okay, thank you. Amendments to the 2020 Business and Planning Act by the enacting of the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act have changed the way in which we deal with these licences, lengthening the consultation and determination periods and giving the Council more robust enforcement powers to deal with breaches of licence and unauthorised use of tables and chairs on the highway. Now the arrangements are permanent, the draft policy attached to the report aims to give some clarity to both traders, customers and users of the highway of the rules around this regime. We propose a 6-week consultation for this policy. With regard to the fees for this function, it's unknown at this time what the cost of enforcement in this area of licensing is going to be, and we have therefore estimated that part of the fee. The fee will be examined in this year's budget round to see if any adjustment is needed. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. I've read the report. I think I read it prior to in May, before there was an earlier meeting which was rescheduled. So thank you very much. Again, have I got any questions about this report? Yes, Councillor Douris. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I was just looking at the fees, proposed fees, £500 to start and £350 to renew. It feels to me somewhat unfair because there are going to be potentially some very small operators. You think about the old high street where you might have one table outside. And £500 is a lot of money, whereas you might go into Marlowe's and see some other larger outlets which have got half a dozen tables outside. Now, I just wonder whether there might be an opportunity, rather than a flat figure, and it would, I can appreciate it would make a little more work, but whether it might be worked on the basis of the number of seats, just to give a little bit more equilibrium and fairness to the smaller outlets rather than the bigger ones, because £500 to a small outlet is not small.
Okay, and coming back in answer to that, the fees haven't been set that high. We've calculated them using the principles applied to licensing regimes in fee setting. We've also used a spreadsheet to calculate how many hours we spend on these, how long the applications take, the number of applications. So that's what we build into our fee setting. The fees have actually been set slightly lower at the moment. I know that other authorities have gone straight up to the cap because of the amount of work enforcing these. We haven't had any enforcement issues with ours so far, so I can't obviously make a judgment on what that will be. So ours is 390 to start with for a new licence, because there's quite a lot of work involved, travel to the sites, checking the site, we have to measure it, all those sort of things. So we've put it in at 390 for a new licence application and 195 for a renewal.
Thank you. It seems to be considerably less than a day's takings for that sort of thing.
Can I come back?
Councillor Douris, yes.
I mean, I should say there's an element of deja vu for me here, because I actually, in another place, was responsible for the pavement licenses in another place and the A board. So it's all come back to me again reading this. However, Just 2 points. Page 114, 311.1, no right of appeal. I think I'm reading that is a statutory no right of appeal. Okay, in that case it is. And then finally on page 118, B14, little f, it talks about an authorised person. And I just wondered, it mentions a number of other authorised people, but what do you refer, who would you refer to as an authorised person? Would you, for example, refer to a member of the council?
No, it would be an authorised officer of the council, like an enforcement officer that has the powers delegated to him. So authorities delegated to him to go in and actually inspect and enforce.
Okay, all right, I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Councillor Deacon?
You mentioned a charge cap. What is that cap?
Cap's £500 for a new application and £350 for a renewal.
So ours is less.
That is set in law, so that's as far as we can go.
Okay, that's fine. So I'm very comfortable with those fees then. Thank you.
Yes, I have a question. It was a while ago that I went through this. I couldn't remember quite where it was, but it's on page 117 of the report. It's one of the rules, Annex B. And it's B8. You must not play music, amplified or unamplified, or any musical instruments, radio or television, whilst your license is in operation. Does that refer to outside? I mean, it looks like, the way it's worded is incredibly general. I mean, it looks like a complete ban on, read literally, any sort of music playing anywhere. But should it actually be qualified to suggest that it's actually just in the place where the license, just outside? Because presumably you can play music in the restaurant.
Okay, yeah, this is in the area outside on the highway that's covered where the tables and chairs are located.
Yes, I would suggest, and maybe this is a Councillor Doris type point, that perhaps that it should be perhaps amended to make that clear. Because when I read it, I thought that was quite. It looks like it ought to say that, because otherwise, read literally, it doesn't quite work.
I think the fact that it says whilst your licence is in operation, that's when the tables and chairs are outside, because part of their conditions, they have to remove them as soon as the day's over. So I think that's the point. It's when they're actually situated outside.
I mean, commonsensically, that's what it would look like, but it's literally, whilst it's is a temporal thing rather than a spatial limitation. But Councillor Reynolds.
Sorry, just on that point, just clarification. So most of the restaurants or cafes and things where I see that pavement licenses are outside, they tend to have, big bifold double doors that are all open, and they potentially do have music playing in the restaurant, which then comes out onto the high street. Is that what we're talking here, or are we talking literally like a radio on the side on a table?
Any cafe could do it in a different way. A lot of them, this license specifically covers the licensing of tables and chairs. So if they're sitting outside on the highway, that's defined as a highway, any playing of music out there. Yeah, but if it comes from inside, obviously it's going on inside the premises. So really that's something that can't be legislated for. You have to take it on a case by case. It's whether it's causing a nuisance, I think, is the main point.
Yes, I mean, I would in agreement with not being allowed to play music outside just because you've got a license outside. But I think I would just suggest it's clarified anyway, just to avoid the doubt. Yes, I think that would. Otherwise, it just looks like while you've got a license, you can't play music. When you haven't got a license, you can play music. I mean, it doesn't. It seems a bit capricious, but that's what it says. That's how I would read it. Councillor Williams.
I was just going to suggest, it seems a perfectly reasonable policy. I suggest we review the recommendation to go to consultation.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. I was about to make exactly the same suggestion. So if there is any dissent from that policy. Yeah. So do we have some wording on page 42 for reference, and it's paragraph 19.4. If we can do this on the fly, it might be okay, but we may not be able to.
Shall I just read out the paragraph and then you guys can let me know, yeah, if this sounds okay? So 19.4, we are currently considering the expectation for all vehicles to meet a hybrid electric standard, and this will be encouraged. As the infrastructure and affordability practicality of hybrid and electric vehicles improves, any changes to current emissions standards will be reviewed. No new vehicles will be licensed, and no existing vehicle licenses will be renewed after 2035 if they are petrol or diesel, in line with the government's announcement.
Well, I mean, that's different from how I read it to start with. Does anybody have a view on 2035 as opposed to, because again, it's a considerable move, it's a considerable amendment from 2027. I mean, does anybody have a view on that?
Well, surely that's the nature of what we're consulting. And we should put that out to the public and the stakeholders and everyone else. In many ways, the date that we prefer is immaterial if we are going out to consultation.
Okay, Councillor Deacon.
Yeah, you know, I'm happy to go with the flow. My only suggestion was, if there was any confusion with the wording, could it just be shared by an email tomorrow, and just a time period of questions 48 hours later, and if no one's come up with a question which was relevant for this team, it would all just go through and be passed. I'm just trying to, you know, find some leeway, but I might be in the minority.
Sorry, can you just make the suggestion again, please, so I understand it?
Because we listened to the wording and we hadn't seen it and reflected on it on the screen, but I'm sure it's fantastic. Would that be shared by email tomorrow morning and just give us 48 hours to comment on the nature before we give you the go ahead? Or 24 hours, 48 hours, or something like that.
I think that's reasonable. I think that's fair. We're all here. We all have email on it. I think it seems that is something that we can do rather than putting ourselves on the spot today. A couple of days won't make any difference. So I propose that we do that so that we've got it, and then we can say by tomorrow we'll set a deadline.
What chair is the legality that we're here, a committee in-person meeting? We don't have do we have the legal authority to make a decision by email? I suspect we don't. I mean, we're here as councillors to make decisions, not to faff and fudge.
This was the point I was going to raise. We don't know whether we have authority to do that. So I think it would be that we have to make the decision, or you have to make the decision to go out for consultation this evening.
Yeah, no, fine. I just wanted to come back, you know, taking scrutiny very seriously is not faffing and fudging. Thank you.
This is not scrutiny. This is not a recommendation to another committee. We're making a decision here. We should become quick to make a decision.
Well, let me just look at the rules.
Chairman?
Yes, I'm just checking the rules. Anything. No. Yes, I think, Sally, you've got your hand up.
Could I make a suggestion potentially to read this out again? So obviously the councillors have a better idea because they've heard it again, and then perhaps go to a vote.
I have to say it's a little unsatisfactory that we got a document that wasn't clear, and we're putting it out to public consultation, and it's now it's being amended and being changed, and we're sort of having to make a decision on it on the fly on quite an important point. I don't think it's very satisfactory.
With respect, Chairman, we come to a full council meeting, and there are from time to time amendments which are proposed at full council meetings where the decision is taken at that time. So that's no different to what was being proposed here. The amendment to that particular line is being proposed, and it should be considered because this is not a scrutiny committee, it's a decision-making committee. And the decision is about the consultation, not about the actual words.
Could we take the officer's recommendation to hear the amendment again and then take a vote on it, please?
Yes, I'm content to do that.
The amended passage will read, we are currently considering the expectation for all vehicles to meet a hybrid/electric standard, and this will be encouraged. As the infrastructure and affordability/practicality of hybrid/electric vehicles improves, any changes to current emission standards will be reviewed. No new vehicles will be licensed, and no existing vehicle licenses will be renewed after 2035 if they are petrol/diesel, in line with the government's announcement.
Does anybody have any dissent from that, from this document as it is? Do we need to vote? It's all agreed. Okay. Well, thank you very much. I understand that concludes does that conclude the business? Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to the officers for your help and your hard work. And thank you, Mr. Ahmed.
One question. So does that mean now that I can buy these vehicles? No, after how long is the consultation?
Oh, there'll be a 6-week consultation, I understand. Maybe Ms. McDonald will answer.
Unfortunately, the consultation period, if I got this out tomorrow, the consultation period will end on the date of the next committee in September, which obviously doesn't give us time to look at things. So it will have to go through to the October committee. That's October the 22nd.
Thank you very much for all your time, and I feel I've achieved something. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ahmed. Thank you for attending. Thank you. And thanks everybody for your participation. Thank you. Oh, and Councillor Douris, if you would like to submit